for, as a Labour supporter and a Labour voter for all of my life, for you to turn around to me and tell me you're going to get me back into the Labour Party by offering me a referendum on a choice between Remain Light and Remain. How stupid do you take us for? You take us for utter idiots, don't you, Barry?
Well, borrowed out to you too. But look, what we're looking at is...
You're going against the vote that we voted for Barry.
No.
Come out and say it.
You remember what was on that ballot paper? It was whether we
leave
should...
or remain.
Exactly.
Quite simple, Barry.
And what it didn't say is how we would leave. And what we've been struggling over the past 3 years, and what the Conservatives have been unable even to agree amongst themselves, so much so that they've thrown 21 of their own people out the party, right? Is how we should leave. How we should leave. Now, some people want to leave in the most right-wing way possible.
It's not right-wing.
Well, it's just leaving.
So you're telling me I'm right-wing, Barry? Are you telling me I'm right-wing?
No.
I voted Labour all my life. And I'm a right-wing person. This is why we in South Wales are going to give you a massive wake-up call on December the 12th. You are going to realise South Wales is like Scotland. You took us for granted and you take us for fools.
Well,
Right there. This took place on December 2nd, if I'm not mistaken. And they did get a massive wake-up call. This is me, by the way. And this is... when it becomes clear that they're going to have an election on December 12th. This was me, October 29th. Right here. October 29th. Listen to what I'm saying. No deal is off the table. And there are seats that the SNP and the Lib Dems are looking to carve out of Labour. Bojo is looking extremely good polling-wise. And, by the way, the Brexit Party. This election is going to be about Brexit. That's the main thrust of this election. And even though Labour doesn't entirely seem to understand this call for a second referendum, the election is the referendum. The election is the referendum. You have Lib Dems and SNP that says, we don't care what the referendum says, we want to stay. Great. That's the lane. That's the guy that's going to revoke Article 50. Clear as day. Bojo, hard Brexit. Nigel Farage, or Brexit Party, rip duct tape off of sensitive testicles, Brexit. That's what that is. I mean, because he's talking about essentially a no deal. Those lanes are filled. Where's Labour? Are you for or stay? Well, we're for, whatever the referendum says. Yeah, but I mean, is that for or stay? Meaning, if I'm a Labour voter that voted to leave, how do I support that position if I think that Labour actually really wants to stay? Right there. That's where I was. And for all intents and purposes, that's where I stayed. My thought was this election was going to be about Brexit and having conversations about the NHS, even though the NHS is important. The election is about Brexit. I want to talk about what's going to take place in 2020. These are my predictions for the UK for 2020. And this is just going by based on what I consider to be the incentives that are present as I know them. I would explain why I think in those terms, and we can look back at the end of 2020 to see if I was in anywhere correct. I've been pretty spot on in regards to my political analysis of this stuff, whether it was the skepticism about the Duma attacks, whether it was the skepticism about the Russiagate, the Trump and Russia stuff, whether it was the skepticism even about the Skripal poisoning thing, in the sense that, well, let's just say that's not a definitive. But even Brexit, spot on. Let's see if we can put that spot onness up for grabs. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal, Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, so we like to say even $1 helps because it does. The UK. Now, I have a fondness for the UK. I can't necessarily place where that fondness comes from, but I do have a fondness for the UK, and I follow UK politics. And I've been pretty, I would say to some degree spot on. I mean, I thought Corbyn could take Theresa May. That's why he was asking for an election. Clearly, he thought the same thing. I thought Bojo was going to pose problems for him, just from the standpoint of Bojo's presence and his ability to campaign. He also had a sense enough to realize that the austerity thing was going to be a dead weight on any election chances for the Tories. And so he became a compassionate conservative, where we've heard that term before. Nevertheless, Bojo wins the election, one very specific refrain: I'm going to get Brexit done, I'm going to get Brexit done, I'm going to get Brexit done. And Labour gave up that refrain when it ignored the referendum, allowing the Conservative Party to take this notion that we are the defenders of freedom because we are going to be the backers of this referendum. Somebody brings up, yeah, you just want to cut regulations to the bone. Yes, that is true, but you allowed us this lane of being the protectors of freedom. Now, so what's going to happen? Bojo will get Brexit done, kind of. They will be leaving on the 31st of January. That would happen, or before the 31st of January. So he will get that part straight. But keep in mind, Brexit is a process that's going to take years to negotiate. They may even be out to the point of having another prime minister, or at the very least have another election before all of this stuff is wrapped up. So get Brexit done, kind of. I mean, the withdrawal agreement, that stuff will be done by January 31st. But Brexit will take years. That's the first point. Second point, Northern Ireland is going to be in the regulatory alignment of the Republic of Ireland, meaning the EU. Now, this was something that the DUP was completely against, hated it. But at that point, Bojo threw them overboard in order to do what he needed to do. And at this point, they have their numbers where the DUP is just no longer needed. This convenience, or this political convenience, has gone away. If Bojo gets what he wants, there will be a border down the Irish Sea. Now, if this doesn't break the Good Friday Agreement, at the very least, it jostles the hell out of it. And so the question becomes, what happens to Northern Ireland? If you put Northern Ireland within the regulatory alignment of the European Union, will at some point they just say, why are we continuously organizing ourselves around UK politics when, for the most part, at the very least in the way that we organize ourselves economically, we are in their union? Meaning almost a de facto European Union in the way that they're arranged. If they're closer to Ireland in this case, and you've put a border down the Irish Sea, will there be an incentive, or at the very least, this movement to question, well, why are we pretending to be part of the UK when all of these other things show us to be just part of Ireland? Why are we pretending that this border actually exists? Will there be a movement for Northern Ireland to reunify with the Republic of Ireland? My thought on this is yes. I get the opportunity to question Galloway. That's my name. That's me. Listen to what Galloway says.
Ireland. So what happens to the Good Friday Agreement on this?
No problem. Ireland, don't you worry about Ireland. Ireland should never have been our business. Ireland will be reunited before you could say Jack Robinson. Trust me on that. Ireland will be reunited and all of them can enjoy the European Union. But I promise them they won't enjoy it as much as they currently think that they will.
Now, this is awesome because he used this as one of his clips on his show, meaning this is his show putting out his clip. Now, he's cagey about this at first. He's like, don't worry about Northern Ireland. You Yankee, why are you bringing up Northern Ireland? This is none of your business. Now, he didn't say it in a mean-spirited way. It was more of a, whoa. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Northern Ireland will take care of itself. They'll be fine. And if you notice, he said, they will reunify as fast as so-and-so. Now, when he's saying fast, he doesn't necessarily mean over the course of a year, nor do I. But I do mean that over the course of the year, there may be steps. People who are reunification curious that may start asking those questions. The catch here is, under Bojo's plan, if I remember correctly, every so many years there will be a question that will come up on whether or not they would reunify, or where they would join the UK's alignment or or Ireland's alignment. But the catch here is that people who are part of that particular organization will never vote to reorganize with the UK in this way, meaning they would, for the most part, always remain in that alignment. That's, if I'm not mistaken, his point. He's like, look, they're going to stay in the orbit of the European Union because of this. And if they're staying in the orbit of the European Union because of this, like I said, at some point they're going to ask, why are we pretending? And this notion of reunifying becomes that much more real. It creates more of an impetus to it the moment that you put a border down the Irish Sea. Galloway agrees with me on this, just by the caginess and you could say straightforwardness of that. Answer: that's not taking place in 1 year, but it will take place. The NHS and the funding for the NHS. Bojo is lying to you about the NHS. The NHS will have vendors going after it. And whether or not you pay at the point of service, meaning whether or not you yourself are paying when you go to the doctor, what will take place is costs will go up because Bojo will be privatizing your services. Either costs will go up or payments will go down. You can't have it both ways. If Bojo is going to be privatizing the NHS, then either he is paying for services, meaning some organization of it is paying for services, and those services will be more expensive. I'm just forewarning you. I know he said we will not sell off the NHS. He was being very specific when he said it, though, where you would be paying at the point of service. That doesn't mean that you won't be paying more money for drugs. That doesn't necessarily mean that you won't be paying more money for some kind of service that you guys are rendering. You will be paying more. Your services will get that much more privatized. I don't know about the tree planting and all this other stuff. I mean, look, it's a Tory government. And so you're going to get what Tories are Tories. They will increase funding back to their normal levels. But keep in mind, the normal levels were just subsistent levels. For the most part, the NHS is suffering. And a lot of that is suffering as a result of being under Tory hands in the way that they, let's say, don't fund it to the level that it needs to fund in order to operate in the way that it needs to operate. I'm doubtful if those hospitals will be built. I severely doubt it. The SNP. So this is Nicola Sturgeon, head of the SNP, on the night of the election.
Well, she joins me now live. Nicola Sturgeon, I take it you were tad pleased about that result. Didn't look very magnanimous, though, did it, your reaction?
Yeah.
So she's celebrating that Joe Swinson lost. Now, Joe Swinson was head of the Lib Dems. Joe Swinson was the one who said, I don't care that the public chose to leave. I am going to revoke Article 50. She lost to somebody who was from the SNP. Sturgeon is head of the SNP. She was celebrating because the woman lost to someone who is essentially a member from the SNP. Now this prick comes on and says, that's not very magnanimous, is it? No, it's not magnanimous. My objective was not to be magnanimous. I was celebrating because I was happy as fuck. I was happy. She lost. And she lost to us. Now, if this was me and this guy asked me that is kind of the way I would answer. And in fact, to me, this level of celebration is not even sufficient. I would be on the moon. I would be chest poked out, looking up, and the way my wife said, looking down at the cameraman, I would be celebrating to the hilt also. Magnanimous is not my objective. My objective is to win. We're part of a party. As I can strengthen the numbers of my party, that is my objective, and that is what has just taken place, even to the leader of the SNP, of the Lib Dems. Yes! That's not very magnanimous, is it? No. No, it's not. She can go home and she can cry on her ice cream. But right now, I'm celebrating. I'm happy. can't believe this guy said that. And this became an issue. They were like, yeah, it was unseemly the way she was celebrating. Even on Galloway show, Galloway and Adam. It was unseemly the way she celebrated that woman's loss. Get out of here. Get out of here. Do you know, to put it in perspective, I was at a chess tournament once. And this was when I used to play all the time. I was a monster at Blitz. I could hold my own even with master level players in Blitz. And a guy was there, and he was beating people, and he was like making a lot of noise about the fact that he was beating people. He was, talking shit to the people and everything else. Now, I didn't like this. And to me, I thought, I'm going to teach that guy a lesson. Because this is like killing a Nazi. You've already set the ground rules in a way that you interact with people, meaning you've just said that you can talk shit to people and make them look bad. Fair enough. I take you up on that challenge. No quarter given, none expected. I crushed him. And I crushed him in a way that talked shit to him along the way while I was crushing him, where a large crowd of people would watch and laugh as this guy was just being obliterated. Now, this guy was a master player, by the way. I wasn't in the master level. I think I was in 2000 level. We were in the same auditorium, but for the most part, that guy is in a completely different class of player, and he was getting embarrassed. I felt amazing about myself. Now, ask me, that's not very magnanimous of you. No, it was not very magnanimous of me, but magnanimous was not my objective. I grew up with grown men saying very bad things to me at chess when I was a child. This is how I am. This, to me, is just expected. I don't understand the magnanimous thing. We are creatures of our environment, after all. The catch here is, she wants another referendum. And she was willing, if Labour won the election, or if Labour increased their seats, that she was willing to deal with Labour in order to get a second referendum for Scotland. Scotland has already had a referendum just a few years ago. It was supposed to be a referendum of a generation, and now they want another one. Their argument is, you guys are leaving, and because you guys are leaving, we should get a question on whether or not we should stay with the European Union. Now, this is always weird to me. Scotland's wanting to be part of the European Union is the most bizarre thing in the world. Scotland has somewhat of a lefty government, a welfare state, and they're going to attach that to the EU, and they believe their fate is somehow better sealed with the European Union as opposed to the United Kingdom. I don't know why they think that. And yet, this is where we are. The SNP will not get a second referendum. Bojo, the Conservatives, he has numbers. He will not be given this notion of a second referendum any leeway. That doesn't necessarily mean that they won't agitate. It doesn't necessarily mean that every time they stand up in Parliament, they would bitch and moan about the fact that the UK is leaving and that Scotland is not getting their say, etc., etc. But they're not going to get what they want on this. Yes, they did extremely well in the election. No, that does not necessarily mean that Scotland wants to leave. They chose to stay the first time around. It's unclear on whether or not anything has changed on that front. Look, this Tory government, there is one caveat in this notion that Tories are Tories. The blue wall. Now, the blue wall is what they call Labour areas that, for the most part, have always voted Labour. Those areas crumbled and cracked and allowed enough Tories to get in, especially from places that have never voted Tories. One of the gentlemen, Skinner. Now, I've seen Skinner saying very bad things to Theresa May and getting kicked out of Parliament once. But nevertheless, Skinner had been in Parliament in that district for over 50 years. I think it's 59 years, some to that effect, some obscene amount of time, either 49 or 59 years. He was in that seat from the first creation of that seat. Labour. He lost his seat. Labour lost in areas, for the most part, that were solidly and staunchly Labour. This is consequences. This is kind of like California going to a Republican. It's just strange. Now, think of it, though, in terms of that first angry guy that I let you listen to, this notion that an overriding issue comes up that is so over the top that your typical political allegiances fracture. And they fracture along the lines because your party, the party that you typically vote for, has its thumb in its ass. And the other party, at the very least, from your perspective, is more right on this issue. And you're stuck with this gut-wrenching choice of, oh, fuck, do I vote for my party or do I vote for this other guy? And think of it in terms of you being a Democrat your entire life, your family being Democrats or Republicans your entire life. But on this issue, this, too much. This is what they were faced with. And not just this is what they were faced with. As that guy said, we're going to show you a lesson. We're going to give you a bloody nose because of what you've done. Do these people immediately go back to labor at the end of quote-unquote Brexit? It is unclear. I mean, the fact that they crossed that bridge once means at the very least that they crossed that bridge. It is not something that they've never done before. And since it's never something they've done before, I would imagine it makes it that much more easier to do it again. This does not speak well for labor in this case in regards to the percentage of people that they may lose in this process. People who don't immediately flip back over. Especially if the Tories get together and they come up with a program that they think can at the very least deaden Labor's advance. Meaning they take actions in regards to their political messaging and in regards to the things that they do. Meaning being, or at the very least, those people being less onerous. Now, I don't necessarily know if they're going to do this, but they would be wise to do it, especially, or moderate to some degree, especially if they want to hold those seats in order to kind of create a new majority for themselves that's a little bit more consistent. I don't know if they'll do that. If it was me, I would absolutely do that. Because my job would be to try to keep Labor from ever coming back and at the very least keep a probability of those seats that they've been able to win over. Even if you can't keep numbers that they have now, even if you can keep a 20-seat majority, that still gives you essentially the run of the land. It would be wise for them to do that. It would be very wise for them to do that. Meaning, if you say you're going to build those hospitals, you need to build those hospitals. The catch here is Bojo is a flagrant liar. He is a flagrant liar. He is known for lying. They even called him on it. This was one of the big issues within this particular election from the standpoint of the conservatives. The fact that Bojo and his grasp, or at the very least admittance of reality, is not necessarily on point. Even this notion of whether there are going to be checks at the border is unclear. He says, no, clearly there has to be checks somewhere because there's going to be a distinction between who the UK is in their regulatory alignments or agreements versus who the EU is in their regulatory agreements. And what I mean by agreements, I just mean their rules. The rules that they go by in regards to what they're allowed versus not allowed to admit into the country. All right, I'll leave it here. This is my, predictions. I'm unsure on that one in the sense of whether or not those people float back to Labor. I guess my thing is there's going to be a probability of those people who don't. The catch becomes, can Labor regain the seats that they've lost in the next election, especially if Brexit at that point is done. Right now, Labor is essentially in disrepute. They've fallen apart. You have lefties who are in that group who are taking the brunt edge of an assault, and you can call it the Clintonites or the Blairites of that group, who for the most part are saying you lost because it's all your fault. The catch become many of those guys were Remainers, and many of those guys had tied Corbyn in knots. It's true that Corbyn should have been stronger as a prime minister. It's true that he should have took a perspective similar to Bojo, that if you're not with me, you're against me, and kick those people out of the party as opposed to keep those snakes around. But nevertheless, he is the one that took the position on Brexit. He is the one that allowed himself to be cowed by his own party, so fair enough, it's his fault. I'll end it here. Krillin 876. Corbyn is a Labour leader ignoring labourers. Yes, Krillin. Yes. When you listen to some of the stuff that people were saying, again, the issue was Brexit, his inability to take a position on Brexit. It's true. Matthew Wayne, I enjoy your coverage of UK foreign politics, JT. Thank you, Matthew Wayne. I appreciate it. I enjoy covering UK politics. It thrills me. I love the accent. That's one thing, but I have this weird fascination with the UK. All right, I'm going to end this because I have one or two more that I want to do before I close my eyes. Like, share, and subscribe. Thanks, everyone. Good night.